Hello, it is time for me to give you some SHARDATHON recommendations of books that you could read for the prompts. Now, Elle, Stephanie and Jessie have all already done recommendations, so I will go ahead and link their videos down in the description bar. I have tried to avoid repeats, but I actually have quite a lot of recommendations here, so it's possible that I have accidentally repeated something, in which case apologies. I'm going to give you, I think it's 3 recommendations per prompt, so that's quite a lot of recommendations, so I'm going to try and keep it brief in terms of the synopsis for each of the books, but I am going to tell you what other prompts they potentially satisfy as well. And I've tried to do kind of a range of genres, and I've tried to come up with things that are a little bit different so that hopefully it's something that you haven't read and hopefully something that you potentially didn't realise counted for the prompt. That's what I'm going for. Whether or not it comes off remains to be seen. You'll have to let me know. So, starting off with Caledon, which is a reluctant hero trope. So the first option I have for you is The Girl Who Could Not Dream by Sarah Beth Durst, which follows a girl who works in her family's bookshop, which is also a cover for their dream shop. So they buy and sell dreams, but our protagonist is not allowed to have those dreams because she can bring things out of the dreams and bring them to life, and so that's not safe. And I'm sure you can see where this is going. She ends up having to deal with situations that she did not sign up for. What else does it satisfy? I think it also satisfies Syl and Rock and possibly Teft and Hobber, probably, and it's middle grade and it's fun and cute, so probably side carry, and I think that might be it. So quite a few there. The next recommendation for Caledon is The Prison Healer by Lynette Noni, which follows a prison healer who has to unexpectedly step in and take part in a competition of sorts to protect one of her patients, not that she really signed up to do that. So once again, our reluctant hero. What else does The Prison Healer satisfy? Let us think. I mean, there's some good friendships in there. So Syl, she slightly helps look after someone who's new in the prison. So Teft, I'm sure that they eat something at some point. So Rock, there's someone that is in a coma. So Lopen. Moash, I think it does that too. Kind of Scar, because she has to kind of learn how to do things. And I think that's it. And then my final recommendation for Caledon is something that I always have to include on a recommendation video somewhere, and that is the Keeper of the Lost City series by Shannon Messenger, which follows Sophie, who grows up in the human world but doesn't really feel like she fits in, and then she realises that she's actually an elf, and maybe that's why she didn't fit in, except, oh whoops, she doesn't really fit in the elven kingdoms either, because she's kind of a little bit different and special and important. Reluctant hero, hello. Definitely Syl for this one as well, definitely Teft, definitely Rock, probably Lopen, but I can't think off the top of my head why. But for sure Dabi. Moash, arguably. Scar, definitely. Drahe, I'm pretty sure. Hobber, I think it's funny in places. I think it's very cute, so I would say it counts for side carry. And it's quite a long series, so potentially challenging. So Chasm Duty as well. So basically, read Keeper of the Lost Cities. It's always my message. Moving on to Syl, this is the companion trope. I had a question about this in the Discord. Companion, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be an animal, it could be a person, it could be an inanimate object, it could be a sentient object, literally anything. If the character in question views that particular person, individual, item, creature as a companion, then it counts. So option number 1 for you is Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett, which follows Sanchia, who is a thief, and she has some sort of special powers. The world is, well, the magic system in the world is kind of a little bit like coding, and I'm not going to tell you who or what the companion is, but one of my favourites, let's just say that. What else can it satisfy? Caledon, Teft, Rock, Lopen maybe, I think, Moash, Scar, Drahe definitely. I think it's funny, so Hobber, and I mean it's epic fantasy and the magic system is a little bit complicated, so potentially Chasm Duty as well. And I think actually Dabi, while I'm thinking about it. Haven't read it for a while, but I think so. Okay, so that was Foundryside. Then the next recommendation for Sil is a little bit of a broad one, so I'm not going to be able to give sort of others really, because it will depend on which book you decide to go with, but it's just The Realm of the Elderlings in general by Robin Hobb, because although I've only read the Farseer trilogy and the first 2 books in the Live Ship Traders series, I am pretty sure that all of the books would have a companion of some description within them, so I'm going to go out on a limb and say any book in this series satisfies that. So if you haven't started yet, start. If you've already started and you haven't finished yet, continue. And if you've already read all of them, then I am always an advocate for a reread. So Realm of the Elderlings, any of the books. And then my final recommendation for Sil is The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams, which I read recently, really enjoyed. It's very, very different, very complex sort of characters and world, and definitely some companions in there, both human and otherwise, and I really enjoyed it. I really don't even want to say too much about it because I feel like a lot of the enjoyment of the book is discovering what it's about, but what else would it satisfy? I think Teft for sure, Rock, yes, Moash, Scar slightly, you could push it to Scar, Drahe, Dabi, and it is a little bit confusing in places, so Chasm Duty. Okay, so moving on to Teft, which is the mentor trope, and there are tons of different types of mentors that you could use for this, so again I've tried to give a bit of a broad approach here. So we have Queen of Blood by Sarah Beth Durst, first of all, which is the first book in the Queens of Renthia series. We follow Delena, who ends up in a magic school after unexpectedly saving her village from murderous spirits. And there are a couple of different kinds of mentor in this book. There's, you know, an individual mentor, and then it's also in a magic school, so there are multiple mentor figures in that context. What else could Queen of Blood satisfy? Caledon, for sure. Sil, definitely. Rock, almost certainly. I'm pretty sure that every book would count for Rock, to be honest. Moash, the spirits are pretty vengeful. Scar, definitely. Drahe, yes. And probably Dabi as well. Then I want to recommend The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood, one of my new favourites, and she's a PhD student, so the protagonist is a PhD student. Ooh. So she definitely has a mentor, and I mean probably everybody's heard of The Love Hypothesis by now, but it's a fake dating trope. What else does it fit for? Companions, there's definitely some good friendships in there, as well as other types of relationships, you know what I'm saying. Teft is what we're doing. Rock, they definitely eat stuff. Moash, Scar, I mean she's a PhD student, so clearly there's some training going on. Pretty sure there's some queerness in there. Actually, yes, there is, because the protagonist is demisexual, so Drahe. Hobber, I found it quite amusing in places. I think it's very beneficial, it's very uplifting, so side carry. And yeah, I think I'll leave that there. Then my last recommendation for the Teft prompt is Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki, which follows 3 characters. One character is an alien running a donut shop. Hello, Rock. The second character is a violin protege, and the third is a violin teacher mentor. There we go. What are the other prompts? Well, Sil, of course, because we have lots of relationships going on there. Rock, as I already mentioned. Donut shop, yum. Lopen, yes. Moash, yes. Scar, she's learning violin, so yes. Drehi, one of the characters is trans and the other 2 characters are lesbian. Not funny, really. It's a very strange book as well, so I definitely say Chasm Duty as well, and definitely Dabi. Okay, so that was Teft. Now we move on to Rock, so some sort of food within the book in some shape or form. So firstly we have Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe, which is a historical fiction romance type book set in San Francisco during the Cold War and following a Chinese American protagonist who is discovering her sexuality and lives and works at her family's Chinese restaurant. Yum. So, food, clearly. Companions, definitely, so Sil. Drehi, of course. Dabi, almost certainly. And if you struggle with historical fiction like I do, it could be a challenging read. I didn't struggle with the historical fiction nature, but that can be something that's challenging for me. So, Chasm Duty, it would be for me. Then my second recommendation for Rock is a far love story, or I think it's kind of a play on the fact that most people call it a faux, so a faux love story, you know, but it should be a far love story. And that is by Lone Lee, and it's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet type situation. 2 characters who work in their family's Vietnamese restaurants and they are in competition with each other. So it's forbidden love, you know? And companions for sure, so Sil, Rock, of course that's the point. Moash, kind of. I won't go into it, but yes. I think I'll leave it there with that one. And then my last option here, very different again for Rock, is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, which doesn't feature food prominently, which is kind of why it's here, because it's just to reinforce the point that it doesn't have to be a major feature of the book. In this book, I think that they eat ice cream and cookies at some point in a couple of scenes. That's it. I think she bakes muffins. That's it. That's enough. And it follows Pippa, who is trying to solve a murder. Highly recommend this book. Really enjoyed myself. She does end up being a little bit of a reluctant hero type character, so Caledon. There's various relationships and a very cute dog. So Sil for companion, Teft because she's in school, so she has various mentors that are her teachers. Moash for reasons. Scar, again, she's in school, so she's learning stuff. You see how broad I'm making this? Like, it's not even really a training element, but she's in school, so she's learning stuff, so it counts for Scar. And because there's been death, grief is being dealt with, so Dabi. Moving on from Rock to the Lopen, which is some sort of physical disability. The first recommendation I have for you is Iron Widow by Shiran J. Zhao. And I loved this book. I read it at the end of last year. It is historical, kind of, because it's based, well, not based on, but, well, kind of based on, but slightly inspired by Chinese history. And the disability in question is the fact that our protagonist has had her feet bound. And so her feet are very damaged by that process. And it's also slightly sci-fi because there are these kind of aliens and spaceships and fighting, and it's great. It's such a good book. In terms of other prompts that it would fulfill, Caledon, Sill, Teft, I guarantee they eat something at some point, so Rock, Moash, Scar. It's slightly retelling elements of Chinese history, so Sigil, Drahi. In fact, there's a nice little poly relationship in there, so that's always great to see. I personally found it very beneficial to read because I loved it so much, so side carry. And there's some difficult stuff in there, so Chasm Duty too, and definitely Dabi. So I mean, you could basically cross off maybe every prompt with Iron Widow except for Hobber because it's not really humorous in any way. So that's a good option. The second recommendation I have for this is a book that I'm actually currently reading, which is The Starless Crown by James Rollins. This follows multiple characters. It's kind of soft magic fantasy items being found that are potentially important, magic being unveiled and prophecies being dealt with, and we have a character who is blind and we also have a character who is deaf. Not in huge massive parts of the book, but they are there. In terms of other prompts that it satisfies, Caledon, Sill, Teft, Rock, Scar. I don't know if it satisfies Drahi. Possibly, but I haven't read enough of the book to know. Definitely not Hobber. It is quite complex, so I would definitely say Chasm Duty. And again, there's grief at various points, so Dabi as well. So that one is another one that ticks off a lot of boxes. And then my final recommendation for the low pen is one that I haven't actually read yet, but that I really want to read, and it's a collection. It's an anthology basically, and it's called Disfigured, and it's basically just fairy tales retold with an emphasis on focusing on how fairy tales are told using disabled characteristics to represent the evil characters. So I've heard lots of great things about that one. It would satisfy Sigil as well because I think it is retellings, but other than that I can't give you any others because I haven't read it yet. But I really might try and read that one myself during this particular readathon. Speaking of which, I'm not going to be doing a TBR because I am going to be mood reading, but I will try to keep my Instagram stories updated and maybe my feed as well updated with what I'm reading as I go through. So if you're not following me on Instagram yet, do that, and if I don't post about it, bug me. Moving on to Moash, Revenge Trope. First off, The Bone Maker by Sarah Beth Durst. Is that the third Sarah Beth Durst on this list? Yes. Do I feel bad about it? No, because I am not giving you Sanderson recommendations, so I feel like I get a pass. This one, there's a revenge trope from a direction that you might not anticipate. Let me say that. And it is basically like a getting the band back together, like they saved the world once upon a time and then they've faded into obscurity, but now the band has to get back together again. That's the vibe we're going with. Caledon definitely works for this one as well. Sill, I think for sure, because it's a friendship group. Teft, not so much. Rock, almost definitely. The low pen, I think. Not in a traditional sense, but yes. Moash is what we're talking about. Not so much Scar. I don't think Sigil. Drahi, I think so. It's not really funny, so not Hobber. And again, we are dealing with grief, so Dabi. Lots of grief in these books. Does that say something about me? Possibly. Moving on, next option, another one that I read very recently and very much enjoyed was Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. This one is a contemporary heist story. These 5, 6, can't remember, Chinese American or Chinese, some of them are just Chinese, some of them are Chinese American, students are getting revenge basically on the world for stealing or appropriating and then keeping artifacts of historical importance to China. And it's a heist story and it's super fun. I think it would satisfy Sil as well because it's a friendship group. Teft, arguably. Rock for sure. Moash is what we're talking about. Scar, because they kind of have to learn how to do a heist because they're not really criminals usually. Drahi, yes, and Dabi. Okay, and then the third recommendation that I have for you in this category of Moash is Kingdom of the Wicked by Kerri Maniscalco. And our protagonist is a twin, and unfortunately her twin is murdered at the very beginning of the book. It's literally in the synopsis, so I'm not spoiling anything. And she wants revenge. It's literally the point of the story. So that one for sure counts. We definitely have Sil there. There's various relationships going on, not least the fact that, you know, she's distraught by having lost her twin, who was clearly a companion. Teft, we have a very mentorish grandmother figure. Rock, there's lots of really great Italian food in this book and series. Scar, because she's learning about magic. And again, grief, so Dabi. Wow. Okay, moving on to Scar. So these are books with a training element of some kind. And again, very broad, so any contemporary book where there's a school would count, for example. My first recommendation is the Blazerath games by Amparo Ortiz, which basically follows dragon riders in a competition. What is not to love? And we are following a character who's just joined the team for Puerto Rico, I think, and is being trained up. So there's your training element. I would say also Caledon, Sil, because dragons, hello. Teft, definitely. Rock, yes. Moash, Drahi. I actually don't know if the author is indigenous to Puerto Rico, so I don't know if it's Retelling, but it could be. And yeah, I think that's it. Then my next recommendation is Stalking Jack the Ripper by, oh, also Kerri Maniscalco. Oh, I didn't even think about that until right in this moment. Anyway, we follow a character, Audrey Rose, who is the assistant to her uncle, who is sort of a forensic scientist, I suppose, and she is learning from him. So training element and clearly mentor figure as well. The point of the stories is really the romance, but hey. So Sil, yes. Teft, yes. Rock, yes. Lopen, I think if I'm remembering correctly that Audrey Rose has some kind of disability, but I'm drawing a blank on that just now. Scar is what we're talking about. Sigil as well. And then the final one for Scar that I'm going to recommend is Fireborn by Rosaria Munda, because they are literally in a school learning to ride dragons. That's like one of the main elements of the book. So clearly there's a training element, and it's kind of like a Russian Revolution type retelling, so Sigil as well. Caledon, yes. Sil, again, dragons. Teft, yes. Rock, yes. Lopen, I can't remember. Maybe someone can let us know in the comments. Moash, yes. Sigzil, I already said yes. Drahi, yes. Definitely not funny, so not Hobber. And Dabi, because grief. I am a stuck record. And then we move on to Sigzil, which is a retelling. So the first option I have for you is a collection. It's an anthology, a collection of short stories, 1,000 beginnings and endings. It's one of my favourite books just generally. I think it's the only anthology I've ever read the entirety of, and it's a collection of retellings of Asian myths and legends. Absolutely loved it. Lots of food in this one too, so definitely counts for Rock, and it probably counts for a lot of others as well. I'm pretty sure Sil, I would have thought Teft would be in there too. Moash, almost certainly. Pretty sure there'll be some low pen in there. I don't really know. There's lots of short stories, so it's difficult to remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure this would satisfy quite a lot of prompts, and I highly recommend it. And the thing is that you can read it and then just go through and tick off everything that it does, and I'm pretty sure it would satisfy a lot of prompts. Loved that collection. Loved it. The second suggestion I have in Sigzil is Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. This one is a Goose Girl retelling, which I read earlier this year, and I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was quite funny, so Hobber, and I thought it was really interesting and fun, to be honest. I think it's a little bit Caledon, a little bit Sil. There's almost certainly some Rock in there. I think that there might have been some low pen, but I can't quite remember. Moash, absolutely. Drahi, pretty sure. Hobber, as I said, I found it funny. And yeah, the thing is I could almost say everything for every book, because the prompts are so broad that you can almost fit anything in, but those are the ones that spring to mind. And then my final recommendation for the Sigzil prompt is 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim, another one that I read earlier this year and really enjoyed. It's a, oh, what is the name of that story that it's a retelling of? It's completely gone out of my brain. Oh, The Wild Swans by Hans Christian Andersen. So yes, it's a retelling, and I just loved it. It was just so well written, so sweet, really, really good fun. Actually, I think I am copying Elle here. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pretty sure she recommended this one as well. So, sorry. It satisfies a number of other prompts as well. Caledon, Sil for sure. Teft, kinda. Rock, almost certainly. Low pen, yes, because the protagonist is not allowed to speak, so she is mute. Moash, kind of as well. Scar, I'm pretty sure there's some training scenes in there while she's learning to kind of look after herself in this new context. And I'm pretty sure there's some grief in there again, so say it with me, folks. Dabi. I just had to start recording again because I reached the maximum recording time, which means that, as anticipated, this video is very long. Fabulous. Okay, moving on to Dabi. The first option I have for you is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I'm feeling like someone else may have recommended this as well, but there are some pretty significant mental health concerns going on in this book, but the main one that I kind of thought of was addiction, because I wanted to be quite clear that the neurodivergent category is very, very, very broad. So we've been talking about grief already, now we're talking about substance addiction. Very broad. So The Poppy War, but all the trigger warnings for The Poppy War. It's a pretty dark book. So I'm definitely not going to say it satisfies Caledon, because I don't think there are any heroes in The Poppy War. You could disagree with me, but I don't think so. Sil, probably. There are some friends going on in there. Teft, she's at a school at various points. Rock, there's definitely food in there. Low pen, I think. Moash, definitely. Scar, again, there's a school. Sigil, because this is kind of a retelling of the Opium Wars and the rape of Nanking, but, you know, slightly different, but still would count for Sigil, I think. Drahi, yes, definitely not Hobber. There is nothing remotely funny about the Poppy War. And because of all the trigger warnings, I would definitely say it's challenging, so Chasm Duty. So that's my first recommendation. My second recommendation is not for a specific book, so again, I can't give you tie-ins to the other prompts, but it's basically any book by Helen Huang, because all of her books feature autism representation. I've read a couple of her books and I really enjoyed them, so I do definitely recommend them. And you can just pick whichever one sounds best to you, and it will satisfy the Dabi prompt, and chances are it will satisfy other prompts as well. If you're unsure, ask each other and me down in the comments and I shall let you know, and I'm sure others will pitch in also. And then my final recommendation for Dabi is a bit of a cop-out, but it is literally my favourite. Well, it's my favourite book of all time anyway, but it's my favourite representation of neurodivergent rep out of any book I think I've ever read, and that's The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, which will satisfy literally all of these prompts because these prompts are inspired by The Way of Kings and Bridge 4, so you could just read The Way of Kings, and if you haven't read The Way of Kings yet, please read it. If you want to reread it, reread it. Maybe I will. No, I shouldn't. The point is, I couldn't not recommend The Way of Kings here because there are just so many characters who are experiencing neurodivergence of some kind or another, and just I had to do it. I had to do it. It had to be done. Okay, moving on to Leighton, which is a second chance read. So I cannot give you recommendations here because what's a second chance to you is individual to you. But just to reiterate, again, this is super broad. So it could be a book that you put on pause. It could be a book that you've previously DNF'd and you want to try again. It could be a book that you've read previously that you didn't really enjoy but you think you'd enjoy it more now. It could be a book that you've read previously that you did enjoy but you think that you'd enjoy it for a different reason now. It could be the next book in a series that you weren't sure about whether you were going to carry on but you decide you're going to give it a go. So many ways that this can be interpreted. So pretty much any book that you've, you know, even if you just like picked it up in a shop and read the first page and thought, yeah, I want to buy that, and then didn't immediately read it, technically second chance because you already started it once. You know what I'm saying? Very broad. Moving on then to Drahi. This is a little bit of queer rep, one of my favourites. So I have some options for you in various different genre. The first is The Sound of Stars by Alicia Dow, one of my favourite books from the year before last. It is a contemporary sci-fi. So it's sci-fi but set on our world where aliens have taken over, and our protagonist is running an illegal secret library, and she ends up forming a relationship with an alien who shouldn't experience emotion but does, and loves music. It's brilliant, it's precious, it's wholesome, I love it. And other prompts it satisfies: Caledon, Syl, Rock, Moash and Dabi. Because, you know, humanity has been taken over by aliens, so there's a lot of PTSD going on there. My second recommendation for Drahi is a contemporary. This one is Delilah Green, It Doesn't Care, another one that I read only earlier this year, a couple of months ago, and really enjoyed it, by Ashley Herring Blake. It follows Delilah Green, who has to go back to her hometown to be the photographer for her stepsister's wedding. She doesn't really want to do this, and then she meets someone that she knew from her past, and you can see where it's going. It's a romance, so we all know what's going to happen. It's sapphic, Love it. What else does it satisfy? Sil, for sure. Rock, definitely. I thought it was fairly funny, so Hobber in places, not the whole thing. It's not a comedy. And yeah, I think that's about it. And then my final recommendation for Drahe, again, is not a specific book. It's like a series of companion books, and it's the Wayfarer series by Becky Chambers, the first book being The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I'm sure that you all know how much I love this series. So good. I'm pretty sure that most books would satisfy most of these prompts as well, to be honest, but again, because I'm recommending a whole series, I can't really go through the list. But it's very slice of life, it's very character focused, there's not much plot going on, so if you need plot, this really wouldn't be the recommendation for you. But if you love characters and you're a character driven reader, this is just, it's all about characters, it's all about relationships, so it definitely would satisfy Sil. There's always food in it, so always gonna satisfy Rock as well, and various other things would fit in there too, but highly recommend this series. Moving on to Hobber. So this is a humorous read, and the first option I have for you is Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q Santanto. I'm going to say this for all of these recommendations, but this book is so funny. It follows a character who works as a photographer for her aunties. They're all Korean. So her aunties are Korean, she's Korean American, first generation, and they all run a wedding planning business, and her aunties are like obsessed with her getting married, so they set her up on this blind date. She goes on this blind date and accidentally kills her blind date, and then gets the aunties involved to help her deal with the body, and they accidentally ship it to a wedding that they're running that particular weekend, and it's just so funny. It's just so funny. I don't think I've ever laughed so much reading a book. I think this is the funniest one on this list. Just absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. The aunties are fantastic, so they would satisfy Sil. Rock, they're, you know, running a wedding, so there's definitely food involved. I don't know that it would satisfy anything else, but honestly, even still, highly recommend. So funny, and it's a pretty quick read. Ditto, Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimino. This one follows Finlay Donovan, who is actually a thriller murder mystery author, and she is in a coffee shop talking to her editor about the struggles that she's having with killing off this particular character, and somebody in the coffee shop gets the wrong idea and thinks that she's an assassin for hire, and so hires her to assassinate. And it's just a comedy of errors from start to finish. Again, super funny. Not sure it really satisfies many of the other prompts, but it's just so hilarious that it's worth reading anyway. And then my final recommendation here is actually a non-fiction, and it is This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay, which is, I mean, you've probably heard of it, and there is an adaptation of it now, which I have watched and I quite enjoyed. And it's basically a collection of his stories and remembrances from his time as a junior doctor in the NHS, and it's hilarious but also not hilarious, and bittersweet and difficult. I mean, it's a challenging read in places, so Chasm Duty, and definitely Dabi. There's a lot going on in here, but I still think it's well worth reading, especially if you live in the UK and use the NHS. So that's my last one for Hobber. Okay, I am turning over my sheet of notes, so we are in the home stretch. The next one is Rerelaying, Read an Indigenous Book. And This is specifically on here because I need to do better about reading Indigenous books. I didn't have much to choose from in terms of recommendations. My first one is a repeat of something Elle recommended here, which is Alatswe by Darcy Littlebadger. I really enjoyed this book. I think it's YA, but it feels a little bit middle grade in terms of its whimsical tone, and it follows a character named Alatswe, or Ellie, and it's kind of, as Elle said in her video, a little bit of like a murder mystery type book. It definitely also satisfies Syl. I'm sure it would satisfy Rock, I think Drahi, and again there's Grief, so Dabi. Then I have a recommendation that's a little bit different, and it's for those of you that want that throwback to the Twilight era feeling, and that is Tantalize by Cynthia Latish Smith, which is kind of like a vampire-y, werewolf-y, super tropey, super candy floss type book. And I read these years ago, but I actually had a really fun time with them, and I haven't read them recently, so I don't know if they hold up. They probably don't. But you know what? They're kind of a bit of fun, and so I recommend them for that. And the one thing that I read it so long ago that I don't necessarily know which other prompts it satisfies, but it definitely satisfies Rock, because once again we have an Italian restaurant happening here. I'm pretty sure I remember it being funny, so Hobber. There's definitely some friends going on in there, so Syl, she lives and learns from her uncle who owns the restaurant, so Teft. Once again there's Grief, so Dabi. So yeah, it's just a bit of fun. And then the third recommendation I have for you is another anthology, so I can't really recommend which other prompts it satisfies, but probably quite a few, and that's Meet Me at the Intersection, which I started and haven't finished. That may well be my second chance read, because I should really carry on with that book. I just wasn't making time for it. I've got it just, can you even see it? It's this bright orange one just here. Can you see that? Yeah. And it's a collection of Indigenous intersectional stories, so still one I'm really keen to read. I just haven't been making time for it, so I need to do that. Moving on to Side Carry, so this is Beneficial. I'm just going to briefly run through. I've noted down 4 books that I felt were beneficial. I'm not going to spend a whole load of time on these, because I think what's beneficial to you is going to be really individual, but for me it's books that bring me joy, books that make me feel happy, that bring me peace in some way. So I have Once Upon an Eid, which did all of those things and was also educational for me, because I learnt about Eid, a whole load of stuff that I didn't know before. Then Heartstopper, it just brings me joy. The Love Hypothesis, same thing. And The House in the Cerulean Sea is, like, for me, a big old hug in a book. And each of those books is definitely covers lots of the other prompts as well. I mean, Once Upon an Eid, just very briefly, definitely has Rock in there, definitely has Syl in there, pretty sure it has Teft. It's a collection of short stories, so it's a little bit tricky. Pretty sure it's got Dre, Hobber I think as well. I don't know about Retelling, and I think Dabi also. Heartstopper, Drahi for sure, Rock almost certainly, Teft they're in school, Syl it's literally about a romantic relationship, so definitely companions there. Dabi, but check the trigger warnings. Alice is really good about giving trigger warnings for her books. The Love Hypothesis I discussed earlier anyway, and then The House in the Cerulean Sea, again definitely Drahi, definitely Rock, definitely Syl, Teft for sure, Moash, yes, Scar, again, it's kind of a school. Drahi I think I already said. Hobber, definitely, I found it funny. Dabi, if I didn't already say that. So lots of good choices there. And then finally we come to then it was Bridge 4, which is just participate in a reading sprint, so you can literally read anything. And then Chasm Duty, which is reading a challenging book. So the first option I have here is the Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. I found this really challenging. It follows several characters who have magic of some description and they are invited to join this secret society, or try to join this secret society. There's 6 of them to start with, but only 5 of them can be accepted into the secret society after they've basically done a year of research and such things. And there's a lot of physics type magic in there and time stuff, and I really struggled to get my head around that. So for me, it was a really challenging read. I wouldn't, and again, you could disagree with me, but I wouldn't call any of these characters heroic in any way, so I wouldn't say Caledon. But Syl, yes. Teft, yes. Rock, yes. Moash, yes. Scar, yes. Drahi, yes. Hobber, definitely not. And then Chasm Duty, of course. My next I actually have quite a few here because challenging could be so many different things to so many different people, so bear with me. My next one is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. I had to put this on the list somewhere, and it's an intimidating book, right? It's a long book, it's slow, it's meandering, it's often described as boring, which I get. There's kind of huge portions of the book where not much is happening. So yes, I think most people would probably consider it a challenging read, but I absolutely loved it so much. What do I think it satisfies? I think it satisfies Caledon, Syl, Teft, Rock, Moash, Scar, Sigzil, I think Drahi, but I could be misremembering, not Hobber, and Dabi. So lots, I know it's a long book, but it satisfies a lot of prompts, and I highly recommend it. What is it about? It's about Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, who are the last magicians, practical magicians, in England during the Napoleonic War. And that doesn't sound at all like anything I would be interested in reading, not least because the magic system is a soft magic system, and yet I loved it. So, hey. Challenger Deep by Neil Shusterman I found incredibly challenging to read because it's quite literary, it's quite metaphorical, and the subject matter is difficult to read about. So definitely check the trigger warnings before you consider whether to pick this up. It definitely counts for Dabi as well, 100%. Basically the main character is having a psychiatric breakdown, and we are experiencing that both inside and outside of this particular character's head, so it's rough. Satisfies Syl, there's a parrot. Teft, because he's in a psychiatric facility, so people are trying to mentor him and help him. Rock, I'm sure there's food at some point. I think that might be it. But yeah, be careful with that one. It's quite a lot. And then the very last recommendation I have is a book that I still feel so conflicted about because it is so incredibly dark, and it's The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. And lots of people really love this book, but for me, it's written in a complex way, it's got a complex plot, and the content is really dark. So it's something that I struggle with quite a lot, and I haven't been able to I've tried to continue the series and haven't been successful because I just feel like I need to be in a really specific place mentally to be able to manage to read that book. But it's fantasy, sci-fi, post-apocalyptic, following 3 characters at different stages of their life. One is a magic user who is in a school. Well, she starts off in a school and then she kind of, you know, leaves the school with her mentor, Teft, to try and resolve some problems, let's say that. Another character who is written in second person is searching for her daughter, and a third character is a young child who has been discovered has magic and so is being taken to school to learn how to control the magic. So Again, I wouldn't necessarily say anyone is a hero, but again, you could disagree with me. Syl, certainly. Teft, yes. Rock, pretty much must do. Lopen for sure. Moash, yes. Scar, yes. Drahe, yes. There is actually some polyamory in this book, which is one of the things I did actually like about it. It's definitely not humorous. Not at all. If you really, I mean, I know I said this before for Challenger Deep, but even more so for this, really check the trigger warnings. Really check them, because it's just about every dark thing you could possibly imagine happening in a book. I mean, it's even worse than the Poppy War, and I feel like that's saying something. It's a lot. Yeah, so ending on a bit of a serious note, but hopefully that is so many recommendations that cover so many different prompts that hopefully you found something in here that you would like to read. Let me know. Let me know if you have a TBR, leave it in the comments. If you have any other recommendations, then feel free to pop those down below as well. Don't forget to go ahead and check my other co-host recommendation videos, which, as I say, will be linked in the description bar. Sorry for the length of this video. I tried to go through it as quickly as possible, but there was a lot to talk about, and I really hope you're excited to participate in SHARDATHON. Not long now until we are ready to go. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram so you can keep track of what I'm reading, and that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button, and I hope to see you here again soon. Thanks!